The next part of our CSS styling is we're going to create some styles for the ordered list. We want to remove the bullets and then adjust some of the formatting on these elements. So I'm going to make a rule for my contact form OL, and of course I want to be more specific here because if I'm using an ordered list elsewhere on my page, I don't want these styles to conflict with other ordered lists. The first thing I'm going to do is just zero out the padding and margin settings for the ordered lists. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a rule for the contact form OLLI. So this is going to set the rules for the list items. We're going to use the list style of none. This will remove the numbering, and I'm going to add padding all the way around of 8 pixels. This will just add a little bit of padding to the elements. If we save and we look in the browser, you can now see that we have some indentation and the numbers have disappeared from the list items. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to style the nested list. Remember when we made the request type, the questions and comments, they exist inside a nested list. So if we look at our HTML, we have the ordered list which surrounds the comment area, but then we have a nested ordered list that just surrounds our radio buttons. So we're going to go ahead and make a rule for those items. So I'm going to use contact form OLLI to target the list items that are nested. And the rules that we want to apply to those are we're going to add padding on the bottom of 0. So we'll overwrite the padding of 8 pixels that we had added before. We're going to tell these to display as inline elements instead of block level elements, which is their default behavior. And then we're going to make a rule for and I'll just copy this selector right here, for the labels that are children of those nested list items right there. I'm going to have these display with a font weight of normal. We had made the font weight bold up here, so we're going to tell the font weight to be normal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tell these to display as inline elements as well. And just to help usability, we're going to tell the cursor to display as a pointer so that when the user hovers over these areas, if they click, it will act as a pointer. So if we go ahead and refresh, you can see that now these appear side by side, and if somebody is going to click these, the focus is going to change to those request items. Now right now we don't see the check appearing, and that's because some of our other rules that we had created, but we'll go ahead and adjust those shortly. Now the next rule that we're going to create is going to target the label that is appearing within our checkbox. Remember on this particular list item we had applied a single line class. So let's go ahead and make a rule for that particular element. I'm going to use my selector for contact form OLLI.singleLine, and then I'm going to target the label that is a child of that element, and we are going to tell that to actually just have a font weight of normal and a display of inline. So I'll just copy these other rules that I had up there as well. If we come back and we refresh, you can see that those particular rules that we've made have now been updated on our page. Actually, they didn't display because I had a case issue. So now we're seeing that this is not displaying as bold anymore. We're going to style this text that says request type right here next. And if we look inside of our form, the area that contains this text is the list. And remember, within that list item, we made a div with a class of group head. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make a rule for that element, and we're going to also target some of our other elements. So let's use our contact form selector, and we're going to say contact form OLLI labels, and in addition to that we're going to target the group head div that we created, and we're going to tell the font weight on these items to be bold. we're going to tell them to display as block level elements. I'm going to add a margin on the bottom of 5 pixels. I'm going to add a color, and the hex value that I'm going to use is 454D4D. I'm going to add text shadow, and the values that I'm going to plug in are going to be 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and then the color that we're going to use is going to be white, so similar to what we did on one of the other elements. And then I'm going to add padding on the left of 5 pixels. And when I save, you can see what's going to happen on the page. So when I refresh the screen, my labels and my div with the group head class are being styled in this way. So that just gives these a little indentation and styles them accordingly. Now let's go ahead and style the input and the text area elements on the page. So I'm going to make a selector for contact form OLLI input, and then we'll also target contact form text area. And these rules are going to be that we want these to display as block level elements. We want to set their width to be 96%, so almost the full width of the available area. We're going to add some padding just to give them a little bit of air, 5 pixels. I'm going to use my margin settings of 0 and auto so that I can center these items. I'm going to set the outline to none. We're going to set a border, and our border is going to be solid 1 pixel, and I'm going to use 999, which is kind of a mid-tone gray. And I'm going to set the background color to CCC, which is a light gray. And we're going to go ahead and add a gradient to these items. Spell color correctly, that'll probably make these work a little bit better. And for our gradient, we're going to set the background, and then we're going to use a linear gradient, and in my parentheses I'm going to pass on FFF for the first color, and then the second color is going to be a BBB, and I'm going to go ahead and tell this to not repeat. So we're using shorthand notation here. And let's add a border radius. And remember, of course, if you are targeting older browsers that would need the fallback content, then go ahead and add that in. We discussed that in one of our previous videos, how we could ensure that linear gradients were applied correctly. I'm going to save, and we'll refresh in the browser, and now you can see that the form fields have like kind of this frosted type of effect. So this looks a little bit better in what we're trying to actually accomplish. Now there are obviously some situations with the things that are getting targeted that we do not want to be targeted, so we'll have to specifically overwrite those rules, but most of these are now appearing in the way that we want them to. Alright, to overwrite some of the problem input fields, we're going to make some more specific selectors here. I'm going to use a selector for contact form. We're going to use OLLI input. So these are the ones that are nested in the nested ordered list. I'm going to set the width to auto, and I'm going to set the display of these to inline. We don't want these to display as block level, so we'll have to overwrite the rules that we had before. So this has to do with these guys down here, the request types. So you can see that now these are appearing more in the way that we want. We're going to now affect our checkbox, which isn't functioning the right way either. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just copy part of the selector right here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll use our input. But in addition to putting input, we're going to use the square brackets. And we're going to pass on that we want to only target the type that is equal to checkbox. So this is a method of selecting and being more specific about our selector. And we're going to go ahead and set the width to auto and the display to inline for these guys as well. And then let's make a more specific selector for our text area. And for the text area field, we're going to set the height to 80 pixels. And we're going to set the margin on the bottom to 20 pixels just to add a little bit of spacing between the text area box and the things that follow it. So if we save and we look in our browser, You can see that now this has a little bit more height to it. There's some spacing between the send button and this particular item right here. Let's target our select box right here. Alright, for this select box, let's go ahead and set the width to 50%. We're going to set the minimum width to 100 pixels, so we want the minimum width to be at least 100 pixels. We're going to set the color of the text to EEE, and I'm going to set the font weight to bold, and I'm going to set the border to 0. And then we'll set the background, and this is going to be fallback for browsers that do not understand gradients, which we'll set in just a second. I'm going to set the color to 2C5 and 604 is the hex value that I want to use, and then I'm going to set the background, and we'll use the linear gradient, and then I'll plug in the values that I want, and we'll set the border radius, and the border radius is going to be 8 pixels. Okay, so let's save that now, and when we refresh, you can see that my little pull down menu here now has this green color, and it is a specific size, and as I resize my window that will get longer up until a specific point, and when it shrinks down it will always stay at a specific width as well. So that's starting to come together pretty well. We're going to style our send button right now, so I'm going to use contact form, and then we're going to say button. And the rules that we want to plug onto this are we're going to set the width to 20%. We're going to set our minimum width to 100 pixels. We're going to set the height to 24 pixels. We're going to float this on the right. We're going to remove all the padding by setting the padding to 0. We'll set some margin settings, 5 pixels for the top, 10 pixels for the right, and let's just use 0 for the other two values. I'm going to remove the border by setting that to 0. We're going to set the color to being FFF. We're going to set our font weight to bold. We're going to tell the cursor to display as a pointer so that we ensure that this looks like a button. And then we're going to go ahead and set the background color. And our background color is going to be set to 610958, which is a kind of burgundy pink color. And then we're going to go ahead and set the background to a linear gradient as we had done before. And we're going to go from a light gray to that same color. And we'll set the border radius as well to 8 pixels. And I'm missing my parentheses right there. Okay, now all the colors of everything looks okay. That was a long selector. All right, let's just refresh to make sure everything's looking okay. So if we look now, the button is looking like this. And because this is a button, I think I'm just going to specify a hover state for it as well. So we will go ahead and have it, let's use the selector of contact button, and then I'm just going to use :hover. And we will copy the background color and the gradient, and then I'm just going to have, when you hover over it, we'll have it switch out to green. So I'm just going to switch this color to that green color that we're using elsewhere. And if we save now and look in the browser, you can see when we hover over this it changes to green. So that looks pretty good. We're going to add a little bit of spacing at the very bottom of our form. Let's just go into our contact form button, and this is now being floated, so it is the last thing that is appearing in our form right here. Let's just go ahead and make a div with a class of clearit, which I think we're using elsewhere in our page. Oh no, here's our clearit class right there, so that's good. So yeah, we'll apply that clearit class, and now that we have that, we're going to go back into the rule that we have on our form, and on the contact form right here, we're going to add a padding on the bottom as well. And let's just add a padding on the bottom of 1em. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now you can see we have a little bit of a problem with the radio and the select buttons. They're not allowing us to select in the way that we want, and they're not displaying correctly. And that's because of the very first rule that we made is a little bit too general. Right here we just use input. So it's styling all of these buttons in this way, and all input buttons, including the input buttons that are our radio type and that are the checkbox type. So we're going to have to be a little bit more specific, and on all of the input fields we have the type as URL, type of tell, type as text, and then we have radio and checkbox. So we're going to use that to our advantage here. We're going to pass on input, and then in the square brackets we're going to say type equals text, and we'll close the square box right here, and then we're going to put a comma, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and we'll put the type as email and the type as tell and the type as URL, and let's do one more for the type as submit. And if we save now and we look in our browser, when we refresh, I have a wrong facing bracket there. Let's just check and make sure the rest of these are okay. Alright, that looks better. Let's try that again. Alright, now when we refresh, the checkbox is working in the way that we want, as well as our radio buttons. So we just can't be as general with those selectors. But the form is coming together. It's starting to look pretty good. In the next movie, we will add the styles for the larger screen. On the larger screen, we don't want our form elements to appear like this. We're going to want them to appear side by side instead of being stacked. But on the smaller screen, we're going to want to stack this information as it appears now. So we'll do that in the next upcoming video.